welcome back to my channel. My name is Avriti, and if you're new here, I do book reviews. I sometimes post vlogs that I make about my life, and I also post vlogs, scenic vlogs more like, that I make of places that I travel to. Today I am finally posting a book review. I know it's been a minute and I've just been really busy with my new job, moving to a new city, and it's been nice mostly, but I've just been really busy and couldn't find the time to film a vlog. I know it's been a minute, but I'm finally back with a book review, and today I'll be reviewing two books that I read in January. Both of these books I really enjoyed. Both are completely different from each other, written in different years and completely different in the way they impact you, but both to me were very impactful. And also these definitely fall under one of those books that altered my brain chemistry sort of book. So today I want to talk about two books: Katabasis by R.F. Kuang and A Breath of Life by Clarice Lispector. So this is my first book by Clarice Lispector, and this was recommended to me by my friend Nia. And every time that she recommends me a book, I have ended up really loving it. And because she spoke so highly of this book, I knew that I had to read it. And if you can tell by the tags in it, I did really enjoy reading this book. This is a pretty short book, but it is so hard to read it in one sitting. And I also feel like it was harder for me to read it because I have recently also read another book called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, which also dealt with mental illness. And although that book was much more harder to read than this book itself was almost absurd in the way that that the story flew. So in A Breath of Life, the story follows our author, who's the narrator of this book, who creates a sort of human-like persona of himself, who's Angela. And the book sort of flows in a conversation between Angela and the author. And while author speaks from a perspective of being done with life and having a really hard time just existing in his day-to-day life, Angela, whereas is looking at world through a different lens of sorts. She wants to experience things, all sorts of feelings: love, hatred, anger, pity, everything. And she just wants to exist. She just wants to experience existing. There are so many things in this book that are so profoundly beautiful that you cannot help yourself but stop and and quote them, and stop and want to remember it, because it's so profoundly beautiful. And I have personally marked a lot of things, but I think the ones that I like the most, like on the very first page, there's a quote that goes, "I write as if to save somebody's life, probably my own." And as soon as I read it, I knew that I was definitely going to like this book way more than I anticipated. Sometimes the conversations between the author and Angela sort of blurs, as if you cannot find out who's dependent more on whom, and who's more reliable or who's more trustworthy, and whose perspective you should focus on more. While one's perspective in the beginnings seems completely dark, and other seems completely sunshiny and bright and full of life, it sort of starts to blur by the end. And I have realized that books like these are books that I enjoy the most. I said this in the written review as well, that reading this book really felt so personal, and like it felt almost as if I was reading somebody's diary, but when they were having a really hard time. It felt like the author sort of bled all over these papers, and all of this is from a self-inflicted wound. And while you're reading all of these things, something so vulnerable and so abstract, like some of these conversations are so abstract, like this is something like truly looking at somebody's head. Like sometimes as humans we have such abstract thoughts that we cannot make sense of it ourselves, and to read it in a paper about somebody else's abstract thoughts was definitely a great experience. But at the same time, it felt so tough to get through it. Like you would think that because the book is so tiny you can finish it quickly, but it genuinely took me such a long time because I was reading it, then I had to take time to sort of take it in. Also, another thing about this book is that it is incomplete. Like, the story sort of does end, but the book itself is incomplete because these are from the last years of Clarice's life, and this was published by her friend who did not, who missed out some of the last sentences, as if to, spare her parents, because it genuinely gets really dark. Like, her thoughts about life, about how constantly she thinks about death, and at the same time Angela is like learning life for the first time ever. So this is something that I really liked, and this was definitely a 4-star read for me. And I also believe that, anybody who wants to read a classic which is, which is not the mainstream Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, etc., should definitely pick up this book, because it's genuinely so uniquely done that I'm really impressed by her, and I think I'm definitely going to read more books by her. And I'm really grateful for Nia for suggesting me this book, because yeah, I definitely needed it. I don't know if you can tell by the duration of this video, but the sun is setting as I'm recording, because I was late again to record. But I decided that today, no matter what, I'll finish these reviews, because I really wanted to talk about this book and I had just not been getting the time. Work has been really hectic. But let's not talk about work. Like, let's really not talk about work. Anyway, so the next book that I want to talk about is Katabasis by Rebecca. Like, she is my god. And I know I've said this about Susan Collins also, but you can have multiple. And I have read so many books by her, which again, I have not read the Poppy War series yet, and I want to this year. But I have read Babel, I have read Yellowface, and I also read another book. Yeah, and I really, really love her books so much. And this, I went into this book so blindly. All I knew was that this is a dark academia book, and it was honestly marketed, like, to me in my algorithm at least, as a love story, which I realized later that that is not the case. Okay, so before I get into the book, can we please talk about the cover? This is a paperback, and just look at the detailing. And once you read the book, you realize how every single thing is so important. Like, the cover is just so well thought. And if you guys have seen my previous videos, I'm such a sucker for a good book cover, especially book covers that are so so descriptive. So this book, this was marketed as a love story set in hell, which is interesting in itself. But to me personally, from my perspective, I think love is there, like the love story is present in the book, but it's not even like the top 10 themes, top 10 things that are going on in the book. And there's so much going on. I know I've heard like some some mixed reviews about Katabasis also, but I just feel like, to me, this book was such peak. I can say this about almost every book by Rebecca, but this is going to be a classic in the upcoming times, because this book is genuinely so amazing. The kind of book that you would want to stay up reading all night, because it's just so interesting. And I want to talk about how a lot of criticism for this book comes from criticism about Rebecca as a person herself, because a lot of people don't like the fact that she constantly mentions, or like constantly has characters that are Ivy League students, and they seem it as her flexing. But honestly, like, this might be a controversial opinion, and I don't want to get into the whole debate of she's elitist or whatever, because I don't believe that. But like, ignoring all of that, I personally believe if I had all of the degrees that she has, and if I wrote the Poppy War when I was 19, I would not shut up about it ever. I would make sure all of my characters went to the same school that I did. I would make sure to mention, the same life, them living the same life or same achievements that I did, because she is genuinely so amazing. Like, she has multiple degrees. She is amazing. She is vocal about things, that she believes in. And how can you just not love her, And Yeah, and like, how can you just not love her? And if that is the criticism that that book gets, please let me tell you that that is not true. You know, people keep saying that, you know, she constantly mentions, first of all, this book criticizes Cambridge so much. And how do I say this without spoilers? But once you find out, the biggest, you know, like reveal of this book of where hell is, what hell is like, you just, like, immediately to myself I remember thinking, how did people read this and thought that, oh, you know, this book is all about just her flexing her degrees once again, because that is not true at all. Wow, the sunset is really pretty. Anyway, so the main premise of this book is that two students, Alice and Peter, was her name Alice? Alex, it was Alex, I think. So two students are going to hell to rescue this professor from hell so that they both can get their PhD degree. And he's the best, like he's basically, you know, the Tony Stark of the Avengers team, and they really want to rescue the professor. So the girl's going alone and the guy obviously follows, and they have a constant battle, you know, they have constant banter throughout the book. Like for the most of it, they have banter and they do not trust each other. And I felt that a lot of people thought that, you know, like the criticism was that the part of the hell, like the journey to hell, was really boring. But I personally enjoyed it so much, because you cannot write a book about journey to hell and then not explore on that topic, because they're not going to a grocery store, they are going to hell. There's got to be a lot of, you know, world building, and world building is all this book is dependent upon. So for you to, you know, so for the author to not do it right would just not make sense, because this story from the very first page is about their journey to hell to save their professor. So if their journey to hell, if their, you know, the entire journey while they are in hell and they are going through like different parts of hell, if the world is not built well, if the characters, the side characters are not, you know, don't have any sort of meaning, it would not make sense. And when I tell you that every single side character has a purpose to play in this book, see, okay, the thing about books that involve, you know, magic, or things like, you know, fantasy themes like magic or demons, or, you know, all sorts of these things, if the people involved, like if the side characters involved don't serve a purpose, don't have a story to them, don't have, you know, something to add on to the story, then the whole world of fantasy just collapses. Because it's not just, you know, like the two main characters just doing stuff. Fantasy has to have a lot of world building, and that is something that I absolutely loved in this book. And this book is big, mind you, it's about like 550 pages in my, you know, in my copy. And I did not feel bored for once in this book. I mean, I was definitely confused when they were discussing their plans on going, you know, on going to different parts of hell. And I was definitely confused about their different, you know, plans and their different maps and all. But this book was genuinely so entertaining. It was making me upset that I had to, you know, put it down and then go back to work instead of just binge reading it in one sitting. So this book also had one of the things that I really like in fantasy, when the character starts with one purpose, and even as, you know, they are finding different things and, you know, they are falling in love, etc., they do not forget their purpose, which is something that a lot of books get wrong. And, you know, another book, Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, also did it very right. And I love that in this book also, because even though, you know, the love plot is sort of there, but, you know, the author did not make it like the main plot did not just disappear because, you know, love got into anger, which is something that I really liked. And their story in general, like these two people were so cute together. They were constantly angry at each other, they were constantly fighting, nobody trusted each other. And because magic was involved, there were a lot of sacrifices made. So many, you know, side characters, different kind of magic, different kind of, you know, references. And there's one thing, if I had to, you know, point my finger at something in this book is that there are sometimes, I think it has happened thrice maybe, where there's like 2 or 3 pages in italics explaining something like magic or other things that are used in this book, and it just sort of feels redundant and unnecessary. But but it's like, it's a 550 book, it's fine if some pages or some things are not up to the mark. But I cannot stop talking about how much I do not agree with the criticism of this book, because I genuinely felt, although it does not compare to Babel, again Babel was flawless, genuinely flawless, but this book was really, really good to read. The character developments were really good. The characters relationship dynamic was really good. There was no found family in this technically. I mean, I did not feel it that much, but I really, really enjoyed their journey to hell. And even after reaching hell, how they navigate through things. And I kept thinking about Percy Jackson while I was reading it, because the characters were sort of also very very kids like you can only expect a child to react the way to hell or the king of hell, to the way that they do, because usually people are scared of people, are intimidated. But only children like Percy Jackson and children like that would act so fearless towards them. And I really enjoyed that in media every single time, because it always makes me very happy when there's like a authoritative figure and like all the adults are supposed to like bow down to him, and then there comes a teenager who's just like, okay, so why should I care about you? And I just love that theme so much. Maybe I don't know why, but I just really like that. So yeah, what else can I talk about this book without spoiling? I don't know, sometimes you just have to trust my words when I tell you that you just have to read the world building in this book, because see, the world building is just done so well. Like, even as you're reading, you can feel the world building. Like, you can imagine every single thing down to the last detail of hell, and it's just so interesting. If you have time, if you have like a long weekend coming up, and if you want to read something, you should read this, because this is definitely a binge-worthy book. That's all for the video, guys. Please let me know how you guys feel about these 2 books, if you read or if you have read them. Shout out to Nia for recommending me this book, and please read this book, you guys. This is amazing. And also, if you have thoughts about any other books that I have reviewed, or you want me to review any book, please do let me know. I would be really excited and really happy to make those reviews. Apart from that, I have read other books in January that I will be talking about soon, hopefully, once I get the time. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it.